Officer Michael Wilson never imagined that his 15-year career with the River Heights Police Department would come crashing down because of his unwavering commitment to the truth. As one of the few black officers in a predominantly white precinct, he had always felt the subtle undercurrent of tension, but his dedication to serving and protecting his community had helped him rise above it all. The summer evening started like any other patrol shift. The streets were quiet, with only the occasional passerby hurrying home from late-night shops. The radio crackled with routine updates, and Wilson was looking forward to completing his paperwork before heading home to his family. That's when the call came in, a reported disturbance at a local convenience store. When Wilson arrived at the scene, he found his colleague, Officer Thompson, already there. Something felt off about the situation. The store owner, a middle-aged man of Middle Eastern descent, was visibly shaken, trying to explain what had happened. But Thompson kept interrupting him, pushing a narrative that didn't match the security footage Wilson had glimpsed on the store's monitors. Later that night, while filing his report, Wilson discovered disturbing inconsistencies. The official account claimed the store owner had threatened Thompson, but the security footage told a different story. It showed Thompson escalating a minor dispute and using excessive force. Wilson's heart sank as he realized the gravity of what he was witnessing, a clear case of police misconduct being covered up. Following his conscience, Wilson reported his findings to Internal Affairs. That's when the real nightmare began. His fellow officers, once friendly faces in the hallway, now turned away when he approached. His locker was vandalized with racial slurs. Assignment requests were mysteriously lost, and backup calls during dangerous situations started taking longer to arrive. The precinct leadership, instead of addressing the misconduct, began building a case against Wilson. They dug through his old cases, looking for any mistake they could find. False complaints suddenly appeared in his file. His exemplary record was being systematically dismantled by the very system he had sworn to uphold. But Wilson refused to back down. He reached out to community leaders and civil rights organizations, meticulously documenting every incident of retaliation. His wife, a high school teacher, stood by him despite the mounting pressure. Their children faced bullying at school, but the family's unity grew stronger with each challenge. The turning point came when several other officers, inspired by Wilson's courage, began coming forward with their own stories of witnessed misconduct. A local journalist caught wind of the situation and started investigating. What emerged was a pattern of systemic issues within the precinct that went far beyond a single incident. The community rallied behind Wilson. Local business owners, religious leaders, and residents from all walks of life showed up at city council meetings demanding accountability. Social media amplified their voices, and soon national news outlets picked up the story. The pressure became impossible to ignore. Instead of giving in to bitterness, Wilson channeled his energy into positive change. He started a mentorship program for young people interested in law enforcement, emphasizing the importance of ethical policing. He worked with reform advocates to push for better training and accountability measures. His story became a catalyst for meaningful changes in police departments across the state. The investigation eventually vindicated Wilson. Officer Thompson was suspended, and several high-ranking officials were forced to resign. The department underwent a major overhaul, implementing new transparency measures and establishing an independent civilian oversight board. But for Wilson, the victory wasn't about personal vindication. It was about proving that one person's commitment to truth could spark systemic change. He didn't just win back his badge, he helped create a blueprint for other officers facing similar moral dilemmas. Today, Wilson continues to serve in the Reform Department, now as a lieutenant. His office door stays open to young officers seeking guidance. The once hostile precinct has become a model for community-oriented policing, with improved relations between officers and residents. The store owner from that fateful night became one of Wilson's closest friends. Together, They speak at police academies about the importance of ethical decision-making and the true meaning of protecting and serving. Their friendship stands as a powerful symbol of what's possible when people choose integrity over intimidation. As Wilson often tells new recruits, the badge isn't just about enforcing laws, it's about standing up for what's right, even when you're standing alone. His story serves as a reminder that real change often begins with one person refusing to look the other way. The weight of evidence sitting on Officer Wilson's dining room table grew heavier with each passing day. Spread across the wooden surface were dozens of incident reports, witness statements, and carefully logged recordings of retaliatory actions against him. His wife would often find him there late at night, poring over documents under the warm glow of their vintage table lamp, determined to piece together the bigger picture. What had started as a single incident at a convenience store was rapidly evolving into something much larger. Through careful investigation, Wilson discovered a troubling pattern. Similar complaints had been filed against Officer Thompson and several other officers over the past 5 years. Each time, the complaints had mysteriously disappeared or been dismissed without proper investigation. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A clerk in the records department, touched by Wilson's unwavering determination, secretly shared a database of civilian complaints that had been deliberately misfiled. The data revealed a stark pattern of bias in how complaints were handled, particularly those filed by minority community members. Wilson's home became an unofficial command center for his investigation. His oldest daughter, a college student studying law, helped him organize the growing mountain of evidence. His wife's colleagues from the teachers' union offered support, helping to document cases where police misconduct had affected local families. The kitchen whiteboard, once used for grocery lists and chores, now displayed a complex web of connections between various incidents and department officials. The pressure at work continued to mount. Wilson's patrol car frequently had mechanical issues that forced him to use unreliable backup vehicles. His radio would mysteriously malfunction during crucial moments. Anonymous threats began appearing in his mailbox at work. Yet each act of intimidation only strengthened his resolve and provided more evidence of systematic retaliation. Local business owners began sharing their own stories. The owner of a small deli revealed security footage showing Thompson and other officers demanding free meals and making veiled threats. A parking lot attendant provided records of officers using their badges to avoid paying fees. These seemingly minor abuses of power painted a picture of a department culture that had lost its way. Wilson's investigation gained an unexpected ally when a retired internal affairs detective reached out. The detective, who had left the force years earlier after facing similar retaliation for investigating misconduct, shared valuable insights about department procedures and documentation methods. He helped Wilson understand how to navigate the complex web of police bureaucracy while protecting himself legally. The local journalist who had been following the case, Christine Chen, proved to be a crucial partner in exposing the truth. She helped Wilson understand how to present his evidence in a way that would resonate with the public while protecting sensitive information. Together, they worked to build a narrative that went beyond individual incidents to expose the systemic nature of the problems. Community meetings began happening in church basements and community centers. Wilson listened as residents shared their experiences, many speaking out for the first time about encounters with law enforcement. These gatherings, initially small and secretive, grew larger and more organized. People from different neighborhoods, backgrounds, and walks of life found common ground in their desire for police accountability. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Wilson discovered connections between certain officers and local business owners who had been awarded suspicious contracts for police equipment and services. The financial trail revealed a network of kickbacks and favors that helped explain why some department leaders were so resistant to change. As word of Wilson's investigation spread, other departments in neighboring cities began reaching out. Officers shared similar stories of corruption and retaliation, suggesting the problems extended far beyond River Heights. A pattern emerged of problem officers being quietly transferred between departments, carrying their misconduct with them while evading consequences. Wilson's methodical approach to gathering evidence was paying off, but it came at a personal cost. His children had to switch schools due to harassment. His wife took a leave of absence from teaching to help manage the growing community response. Their savings dwindled as legal fees mounted. Yet the family's dinner table conversations remained focused on the importance of standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. The investigation received a significant boost when a retiring sergeant came forward with years of personal notes documenting departmental misconduct. The sergeant, facing a terminal illness, wanted to clear his conscience. His detailed records provided crucial corroboration for many of Wilson's findings and helped identify key players in the cover-up scheme. Technology played a crucial role in advancing the investigation. A group of volunteer cybersecurity experts helped Wilson secure his digital evidence and communications. They uncovered attempts to hack his personal email and documented a coordinated social media campaign aimed at discrediting him. Each failed attempt to silence him only added to the body of evidence. As the investigation neared its 6th month, Wilson faced a crucial decision. The evidence he had gathered pointed to corruption at the highest levels of the department, including some city officials. Going public with everything would likely trigger a major scandal and potentially put his family at even greater risk. But keeping quiet would mean betraying the trust of all those who had bravely shared their stories. Through it all, Wilson maintained his professionalism and integrity. He continued showing up for his shifts, doing his job with the same dedication that had earned him commendations in the past. His quiet dignity in the face of ongoing harassment earned him growing respect from younger officers who saw him as a model of what law enforcement should be. The morning the story broke, River Heights woke up to a truth they couldn't ignore. Christine Chen's explosive front-page article in the River Heights Tribune laid bare the years of systematic corruption within the police department. The evidence Wilson had meticulously gathered over months painted a picture so clear and compelling that no amount of official denial could dismiss it. The article's release was strategically timed to coincide with a city council meeting, ensuring maximum impact. Wilson sat quietly in the back of the packed chamber as council members frantically flipped through copies of the newspaper. The police chief, looking notably uncomfortable, shifted in his seat as citizens lined up at the microphone to share their stories. Social media exploded with reactions. The hashtag River Heights Truth began trending locally, then nationally. Local news stations camped outside the police department, their cameras capturing the steady stream of officials rushing in and out of emergency meetings. The story had broken containment, spreading far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The convenience store owner's security footage, now public, became the face of the scandal. News channels played it on loop, the clear disconnect between Officer Thompson's official report and what actually transpired that night. Each viewing brought new waves of public outrage and calls for accountability. Within the department, the reaction was immediate and polarizing. Several officers, seeing which way the wind was blowing, began approaching Wilson privately, offering their own testimonies. Others doubled down on their hostility, though now more carefully, aware that their actions were under scrutiny. The thin blue line was starting to show cracks. Wilson's phone wouldn't stop ringing. National news networks wanted interviews. Civil rights organizations offered support and resources. Law enforcement reform advocates from across the country reached out to learn more about his documentation methods. His story was becoming a blueprint for other officers facing similar situations. The city's response proved telling. Initially, officials tried to downplay the revelations, describing them as isolated incidents being blown out of proportion. But as more evidence emerged and public pressure mounted, their tone changed. The mayor, facing re-election, called for an independent investigation. The police chief was placed on administrative leave pending review. Community response transformed from anger to action. Local religious leaders organized peaceful demonstrations calling for department reform. Business owners displayed signs supporting police accountability. School teachers incorporated discussions about civic responsibility and moral courage into their lessons, using Wilson's story as a real-world example. The retired internal affairs detective who had helped Wilson came out of retirement to assist the independent investigation team. His expertise proved invaluable in navigating the department's complex bureaucracy and understanding how various pieces of evidence fit together. His presence lent additional credibility to Wilson's findings. Wilson's family faced the public exposure with grace and unity. His wife became an unexpected spokesperson for police families who support reform, speaking eloquently about the cost of staying silent versus the price of speaking up. Their children, though still dealing with peer pressure, began to understand the historical significance of their father's actions. The financial strain on Wilson's family eased as a legal defense fund, set up by community members, gained widespread support. Small donations poured in from across the country, often accompanied by notes of encouragement and similar stories of facing corruption. The outpouring of support helped balance the ongoing stress of public scrutiny. International media picked up the story, drawing parallels with similar cases worldwide. Wilson's methodical approach to documenting misconduct became a case study in police reform circles. Reform advocates cited his example when pushing for new accountability measures in other departments. The most powerful moments came from unexpected sources. A group of retired officers from the department's early days visited Wilson at home, sharing stories of how things had gradually changed over the decades. Their perspectives helped everyone understand that corruption doesn't happen overnight, it creeps in slowly when good people stay silent. Young officers from neighboring departments began seeking Wilson's guidance. They saw him as a model for maintaining integrity in challenging situations. These quiet mentoring sessions, often held over coffee before dawn shifts, gave Wilson hope that lasting change was possible. Local businesses that had initially feared retaliation for supporting Wilson now proudly displayed their allegiance. The convenience store where it all began became a symbol of resistance against corruption, with customers going out of their way to shop there and show support. The evidence continued to grow even after the initial revelations. Citizens came forward with years of documented incidents that had previously been dismissed. Each new piece of evidence reinforced the pattern Wilson had uncovered, making it increasingly difficult for department leadership to deny the scope of the problem. As the third month of public scrutiny drew to a close, signs of real change began to emerge. The City Council approved funding for body cameras and civilian oversight. Department policies were being rewritten with community input. Training programs were overhauled to emphasize de-escalation and cultural awareness. Through it all, Wilson maintained his focus on the bigger picture. When interviewed, he consistently redirected attention from himself to the broader issues of systemic reform and community trust. His humility in the face of growing recognition earned him even more respect from both supporters and former critics. The independent investigation team arrived on a Monday morning, taking over an entire floor of the City Hall. Led by retired federal investigators and civil rights attorneys, they brought a level of scrutiny that the River Heights Police Department had never experienced. Wilson watched from his patrol car as boxes of records were carried into the building, knowing that each contained pieces of the truth he had fought so hard to expose. The investigation process was meticulous and comprehensive. Every officer in the department, from rookie to senior command, was interviewed. The team cross-referenced incident reports with body camera footage, dispatch records, and civilian complaints. Patterns that Wilson had identified began to emerge more clearly under professional scrutiny. Officer Thompson's case proved to be just the tip of the iceberg. The investigation uncovered a network of informal agreements between certain officers and local businesses, trading protection for favors. Financial audits revealed unexplained deposits in several officers' accounts, coinciding with major drug busts where evidence had gone missing. The police union's response evolved as more evidence came to light. Initially hostile to the investigation, union leadership faced pressure from younger members who demanded reform. Internal debates became heated as officers chose sides between maintaining the status quo and embracing accountability. Wilson's daily routine took on a new rhythm. Between his regular patrol shifts, he spent hours with the investigation team, walking them through his documentation and helping them understand the department's unwritten rules. His attention to detail in gathering evidence earned him respect from the investigators, who praised his professional approach to exposing misconduct. The convenience store owner's testimony became a cornerstone of the investigation. His detailed account of years of harassment and intimidation by certain officers opened up new avenues of inquiry. Other business owners in the community, seeing his courage, began sharing similar experiences with the investigation team. Department leadership underwent a dramatic transformation. The suspended police chief resigned rather than face further scrutiny. Several senior officers suddenly opted for early retirement. The power vacuum created opportunities for reform-minded officers to step into leadership roles, though the transition wasn't without tension. The city council chambers became a weekly battleground as new policies were debated and voted on. Wilson attended every session, quietly observing as the system he had challenged began to change. The most heated discussions centered around the creation of a civilian oversight board with real power to investigate complaints. Community involvement in the reform process exceeded all expectations. Town hall meetings drew hundreds of residents eager to share their ideas for improving police-community relations. Local civil rights organizations worked alongside police reform experts to draft new training protocols and accountability measures. The investigation team's use of technology proved crucial. They employed data analysis software to identify patterns in police responses, revealing disparities in how different neighborhoods were policed. This concrete evidence helped overcome resistance to change from department traditionalists. Wilson's family life began to stabilize as the investigation progressed. His children, once ostracized, found new respect at school as classmates' parents began to understand the importance of what their father had done. His wife returned to teaching, incorporating lessons about civic courage into her curriculum. The retired internal affairs detective who had helped Wilson became a regular consultant to the investigation team. His institutional knowledge proved invaluable in understanding how previous reform attempts had been undermined. Together with Wilson, they helped create new safeguards against future corruption. National police reform organizations took notice of the River Heights investigation. They sent observers to study the process, hoping to replicate successful elements in other cities. Wilson found himself invited to speak at law enforcement conferences, sharing his experiences with officers from across the country. The investigation's findings began affecting cases in the criminal justice system. The district attorney's office launched reviews of past convictions involving discredited officers. Several cases were overturned, leading to emotional reunions between wrongly convicted individuals and their families. Local media coverage evolved from sensational headlines to thoughtful analysis. Christine Chen, the journalist who had broken the initial story, wrote a series of in-depth articles examining how police culture had reached this point and what meaningful reform might look like. Her reporting won regional awards and helped the public understand the complexity of institutional change. As winter approached, the investigation team's preliminary findings were made public. The report validated Wilson's allegations and went further, documenting systematic problems that had festered for years. The city leadership's response was swift and comprehensive, allocating resources for department-wide retraining and new oversight mechanisms. Wilson watched these developments with mixed emotions. While vindicated by the findings, he felt the weight of responsibility for ensuring that real change took root. He began mentoring younger officers, sharing lessons learned from his experience and helping them understand the importance of ethical policing. The investigation's impact reached beyond the police department. Other city agencies began reviewing their own accountability measures. The mayor established a task force on government transparency, with Wilson invited to serve as a special advisor despite still being an active duty officer. Spring brought more than just new weather to River Heights. The police department, operating under interim leadership, began implementing sweeping reforms. Wilson found himself at the center of these changes, not by choice but by circumstance. His experience and integrity made him a natural bridge between the old guard and the new vision for the department. The first major change came in the form of mandatory retraining sessions. Officers gathered in the community center, many sitting uncomfortably as community members shared their experiences with law enforcement. Wilson noticed how some of his colleagues, initially defensive, began to truly listen as stories of fear, mistrust, and hope filled the room. Technology played a crucial role in the reforms. New body cameras were issued to every officer, with strict protocols for activation and footage review. The department's computer systems were overhauled to prevent the disappearance of civilian complaints. Wilson helped design a transparent tracking system that allowed both officers and civilians to monitor the status of investigations. The convenience store owner, whose case had sparked the entire movement, became an unexpected partner in the reform process. He opened his store for community police dialogue sessions, where officers and residents could have honest conversations over coffee and snacks. These informal meetings did more to build trust than years of official community outreach programs. Training procedures underwent a complete transformation. Instead of focusing solely on tactical responses, new modules emphasized de-escalation techniques, cultural awareness, and mental health crisis intervention. Wilson worked with training staff to incorporate real-world scenarios based on his experiences, helping officers understand the importance of ethical decision-making under pressure. The Civilian Oversight Board began its work, bringing a new level of accountability to the department. Wilson served as a liaison, helping board members understand police procedures while ensuring officer concerns were heard. The board's first few cases were handled with such professionalism that even skeptical officers began to see its value. Department culture showed signs of real change. Young officers who had once stayed silent about misconduct now felt empowered to speak up. The thin blue line mentality was gradually being replaced by a commitment to transparency and community service. Wilson noticed how officers began looking out for each other in a healthier way, supporting those who upheld ethical standards rather than protecting those who broke them. The impact on the community became increasingly visible. Crime reporting increased as residents began to trust the police more. Tips about criminal activity came in more frequently, often from neighborhoods that had historically been hesitant to work with law enforcement. Officers found themselves being invited to community events not as security, but as welcomed participants. Wilson's family life reflected the broader changes in the community. His children reported positive interactions with their classmates' parents who were officers. His wife's teacher colleagues incorporated lessons about civic responsibility and moral courage into their curricula, using recent events as real-world examples for their students. The department's approach to recruitment and promotion changed dramatically. Background checks became more thorough, with special attention paid to candidates' history of handling ethical challenges. Promotion criteria now included demonstrated commitment to community policing and ability to build trust across diverse populations. Local businesses, once afraid of retaliation for supporting reform, now proudly displayed signs welcoming officers who embraced the new approach to policing. The annual police community picnic, previously a sparsely attended formality, became a genuine celebration of partnership and progress. Reform wasn't without its challenges. Some veteran officers struggled to adapt to the new requirements for transparency and accountability. Budget constraints meant some changes had to be implemented gradually. Wilson spent countless hours mediating between different factions within the department, helping everyone understand that change, while difficult, was necessary and positive. The media's role evolved from watchdog to partner in progress. Local news outlets began featuring regular updates on reform implementation, highlighting successes while maintaining objective coverage of ongoing challenges. Christine Chen's continued reporting helped the public understand the complexity of institutional change. Wilson found himself increasingly called upon to speak at police academies across the state. His message was simple but powerful: true police work is about serving the community, not controlling it. Cadets were particularly moved by his emphasis on the personal cost of staying silent in the face of misconduct. The department's handling of critical incidents showed marked improvement. When a high-stakes situation arose involving a mental health crisis, officers demonstrated their new training by successfully de-escalating the situation without force. The incident was recorded, reviewed, and used as a training example for other departments. Community policing took on new meaning as officers were assigned to regular beats, allowing them to build relationships with residents and business owners. The us versus them mentality began to fade as officers became familiar faces in their assigned neighborhoods. Wilson helped develop guidelines for these assignments, ensuring officers had the time and resources to engage meaningfully with community members. As the first year of reforms drew to a close, external auditors noted significant improvements in department performance metrics. Civilian complaints had decreased, while successful resolution of cases had increased. More importantly, surveys showed growing trust between the police and the community they served. 2 years after Wilson first stood up against corruption, River Heights had become a case study in successful police reform. Departments from across the country sent representatives to learn from their experience. Wilson, now serving as training coordinator alongside his patrol duties, found himself at the center of a movement that stretched far beyond his original goals. The changes in River Heights attracted national attention when a major crisis was handled with remarkable skill and sensitivity. A potentially volatile protest situation was transformed into a model of police-community cooperation. Officers, applying their new training, worked with protest organizers to ensure both safety and free expression. News cameras captured images of officers engaging in respectful dialogue with protesters, a stark contrast to confrontational scenes from other cities. Wilson's approach to training new officers had evolved based on real-world experience. Rather than focusing solely on procedures, he emphasized the importance of building genuine community relationships. Recruits spent time working with local youth programs, participating in community service projects, and learning from residents about their needs and concerns. This hands-on approach produced officers who saw themselves as part of the community rather than separate from it. The convenience store that had been at the center of the original incident became an unofficial community center. The owner, working with Wilson and other officers, started a youth mentorship program. Local teens could come after school for homework help, job training, and conversations with officers in a relaxed setting. The program became so successful that other businesses began replicating it across the city. Technology continued to play a crucial role in maintaining transparency. The department's custom-built complaint tracking system, inspired by Wilson's meticulous documentation methods, was now being adapted by other cities. Body camera footage review sessions, once viewed with suspicion, became valuable training opportunities where officers could learn from both successes and mistakes. The Civilian Oversight Board's success led to expanded responsibilities. They now participated in officer training, policy development, and community outreach initiatives. Their quarterly reports, praised for both thoroughness and fairness, became models for other cities implementing similar oversight programs. Wilson's role as liaison helped ensure that both officer and community perspectives were considered in decision-making. Department morale showed sustained improvement as the new culture took root. Officers reported feeling more satisfied with their work, knowing they had clear guidelines and support for ethical decision-making. The annual employee survey showed record high scores for job satisfaction and professional pride. Even veteran officers who had initially resisted change now acknowledged the benefits of the new approach. Wilson's family life reflected the department's transformation. His children, now in high school and college, spoke proudly about their father's role in changing the system. His wife developed a curriculum about civic engagement that was adopted by schools across the district. Their home remained a gathering place for officers and community members working on various initiatives. The impact on crime statistics told an encouraging story. While some types of reported crimes initially increased due to greater community trust and willingness to report incidents, serious crimes showed a steady decline. More importantly, case closure rates improved as residents became more willing to cooperate with investigations. Local businesses reported improved relationships with law enforcement. The Chamber of Commerce created a special award for officers who demonstrated exceptional community service, named in honor of the convenience store owner who had first supported Wilson. The annual ceremony became a celebrated community event, highlighting the positive changes in police-community relations. Professional recognition began flowing in from unexpected sources. Civil rights organizations praised the department's commitment to reform. Law enforcement agencies sought advice on implementing similar changes. Wilson found himself invited to speak at national conferences, sharing River Heights' journey toward transparent, community-oriented policing. The department's approach to crisis intervention became particularly noteworthy. Officers successfully handled several high-risk situations using de-escalation techniques and mental health resources. These incidents were documented and shared with other departments as examples of effective nonviolent resolution strategies. Training innovations continued to evolve. Virtual reality simulations, developed with input from community members, helped officers practice difficult scenarios. Regular community feedback sessions ensured that training remained relevant to real-world challenges. Wilson worked to ensure that every aspect of officer preparation emphasized both tactical competence and ethical awareness. The city's budget reflected the community's commitment to sustained reform. Funding was secured for ongoing training, technology upgrades, and community programs. The mayor and city council, seeing the positive results, made police reform a permanent priority rather than a temporary initiative. Research teams from major universities began studying the River Heights model. They documented the factors that contributed to successful reform: consistent leadership, community involvement, transparent processes, and ongoing adaptation to new challenges. Wilson collaborated with researchers, helping them understand the human elements that made change possible. As his influence grew, Wilson remained focused on his core mission: serving his community with integrity. He continued patrolling the same streets, maintaining the personal connections that had supported him through the difficult early days of reform. His example inspired a new generation of officers who saw that it was possible to be both effective and ethical in law enforcement. 3 years into River Heights' transformation, the ripple effects of Wilson's actions had reached far beyond city limits. A federal task force on police reform invited him to Washington, D.C. to share his experiences. Sitting before a panel of lawmakers, Wilson spoke not as an activist or critic, but as an officer who had seen both the problems and solutions firsthand. The River Heights model began attracting international attention. Police departments from Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia sent observers to study their methods. Wilson worked with the department's public affairs team to develop comprehensive training materials that could be shared with other agencies. These resources emphasized the human elements of reform: building trust, maintaining integrity, and serving the community. Back home, the department continued evolving. New officers now went through an innovative training program that paired them with community mentors for their first year. These mentors, local business owners, religious leaders, and longtime residents, helped rookies understand the neighborhood dynamics and build meaningful relationships with residents. Wilson had designed this program based on his own experiences of how community connections had supported him during the difficult days of exposing corruption. The Convenience Store Owners Youth Program had grown into a citywide initiative. What started as informal homework help had become a structured mentorship program connecting young people with both officers and local professionals. Several program graduates were now entering the police academy themselves, bringing with them a deep understanding of community-oriented policing. Technology adoption reached new levels as River Heights became a testing ground for innovative police transparency tools. A new smartphone app allowed residents to rate interactions with officers, provide feedback on community programs, and access real-time safety information. The department's commitment to transparency had transformed what was once a contentious relationship into a collaborative partnership with the community. Wilson's family life reflected the broader changes in police-community relations. His daughter, now studying criminal justice in college, frequently brought classmates home to learn from her father's experience. His wife had developed a nationally recognized curriculum on civic engagement and police reform, drawing on River Heights' journey as a case study. Their home remained a gathering place for officers, community leaders, and reform advocates working to spread positive change. The department's approach to mental health calls became a national model. Officers worked alongside mental health professionals in specialized response teams, dramatically reducing the need for force in crisis situations. The success of this program led to similar initiatives in departments across the country, with River Heights officers traveling to provide training and support. Research into the River Heights reform model revealed surprising economic benefits. Crime reduction, improved business relationships, and increased community trust had led to measurable economic growth in previously struggling neighborhoods. The Chamber of Commerce reported increased business startups and reduced insurance costs, directly attributing these improvements to enhanced police-community relations. Local media coverage evolved into documentary projects capturing the human stories behind the reforms. Christine Chen, the journalist who had first broken Wilson's story, produced a series examining how individual officers and community members had contributed to the department's transformation. These stories helped other cities understand that meaningful change required both systematic reforms and personal commitment. The Civilian Oversight Board's role continued to expand. They now participated in officer recruitment, policy development, and long-term strategic planning. Their quarterly community forums became must-attend events where residents and officers could openly discuss challenges and solutions. Wilson's role as liaison helped ensure these discussions remained productive and focused on practical improvements. Training innovations attracted attention from police academies nationwide. Virtual reality scenarios, developed with community input, helped officers practice de-escalation techniques in realistic situations. Regular feedback sessions with community members ensured that training remained relevant to real-world challenges. Wilson worked to ensure that ethical decision-making was integrated into every aspect of officer preparation. The department's handling of sensitive situations demonstrated the effectiveness of their reforms. When a high-profile incident in a neighboring city led to protests, River Heights officers helped maintain peace while protecting free speech rights. Their approach was studied and adopted by other departments facing similar challenges. Wilson's mentorship of young officers became increasingly important as the department grew. He helped them understand that true police work was about building relationships and solving problems, not just enforcing laws. His morning coffee sessions with rookies became legendary, combining practical advice with discussions about the ethical challenges of modern policing. The city's commitment to reform remained strong even as leadership changed. New mayors and council members recognized the value of the improvements and worked to sustain funding for training, technology, and community programs. The police department's success had become a point of pride for River Heights, attracting positive attention and new residents to the city. Universities began incorporating the River Heights case study into their criminal justice programs. Wilson occasionally guest lectured, sharing insights about the practical challenges of implementing reform. His emphasis on the human elements of change, building trust, maintaining integrity, and serving the community, resonated with students preparing for careers in law enforcement. As his influence grew, Wilson remained grounded in his daily duties. He still patrolled the same streets, maintaining the personal connections that had supported him through difficult times. His example inspired a new generation of officers who saw that it was possible to be both effective and ethical in law enforcement. 5 years after that fateful night at the convenience store, Wilson stood at the podium of the newly inaugurated Police Training Academy. The building's dedication plaque read, "Integrity First," a phrase that had become River Heights' unofficial motto. Looking out at the faces of new recruits, community leaders, and fellow officers, he reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. The academy itself represented a new approach to police training. Unlike traditional facilities, it was designed with community integration in mind. Large windows created transparency, community meeting spaces occupied the ground floor, and training rooms were equipped to simulate real-world scenarios. Local residents regularly participated in training sessions, sharing their perspectives and helping shape the next generation of officers. The convenience store owner, now a respected community leader, sat in the front row. His small business had grown into a chain of stores, each serving as a neighborhood hub where officers and residents could build relationships. The youth program he had started with Wilson had expanded to all his locations, creating safe spaces for young people to interact positively with law enforcement. Technology continued evolving to support transparent policing. The department's data analytics team, working with community oversight, developed predictive models that helped identify potential problems before they escalated. Body camera footage, once viewed with suspicion, had become a valuable training tool and a source of pride for officers doing good work. Wilson's family had grown alongside the changes. His children, now adults themselves, had chosen careers in public service inspired by their father's example. His wife's educational program on civic engagement had been adopted by schools nationwide. Their home remained a gathering place for those working to improve police-community relations, though the conversations had evolved from fighting corruption to building on success. The department's approach to community policing had become a blueprint for others. Officers were now deeply embedded in neighborhood life, participating in local events, mentoring youth, and solving problems before they became crimes. The us versus them mentality had been replaced by a genuine sense of shared responsibility for community safety. Research teams studying the River Heights model identified key factors in its success: consistent leadership, community involvement, transparent processes, and a willingness to learn from mistakes. But they also noted something less tangible: a cultural shift that had transformed how officers and residents viewed each other. The Civilian Oversight Board had evolved into a true partnership between police and community. Their monthly meetings, once tense affairs, now focused on proactive improvements rather than reactive criticism. Wilson's role as liaison had helped build trust between officers and board members, creating a model of collaborative governance. Training innovations continued pushing boundaries. Virtual reality scenarios now incorporated input from community members, mental health professionals, and civil rights experts. Officers practiced de-escalation techniques in realistic situations, learning to handle complex scenarios with minimal force. The emphasis remained on building relationships and solving problems rather than just enforcing laws. Economic impacts of reformed policing became increasingly clear. Businesses reported lower security costs, insurance rates had dropped, and new investments flowed into previously struggling neighborhoods. The Chamber of Commerce credited improved police-community relations with creating an environment where local businesses could thrive. Wilson's influence extended far beyond River Heights. He had testified before state legislatures, advised federal policy makers, and consulted with departments worldwide. Yet he maintained his connection to daily police work, believing that real change happened through personal interactions rather than policy documents. The department's handling of critical incidents demonstrated the lasting impact of reforms. When faced with potentially volatile situations, officers consistently chose dialogue over confrontation, de-escalation over force. Their success stories became case studies for other departments seeking to improve their crisis response. Local media coverage evolved from reporting on problems to documenting solutions. Christine Chen, whose initial story had helped expose corruption, now produced regular features highlighting innovative police-community partnerships. These stories helped other cities understand that meaningful change required both systematic reforms and personal commitment. The next generation of officers brought new energy to community policing. Many had grown up in River Heights, witnessing the transformation firsthand. They entered the academy with a different perspective, seeing police work as a partnership with the community rather than an authority over it. Wilson's morning coffee sessions with rookies continued, though the conversations had changed. Instead of focusing on fighting corruption, they discussed ways to build on success and meet new challenges. His message remained consistent: true police work was about serving the community with integrity. As he concluded his dedication speech, Wilson shared a story that captured the essence of their journey. He described a recent incident where a young officer had chosen to help rather than arrest a troubled teen, connecting him with resources and support instead of putting him in handcuffs. The officer had learned this approach through the Community Mentorship Program, a program that wouldn't have existed without the changes sparked by that night at the convenience store. Looking toward the future, Wilson saw challenges ahead but also reasons for hope. New technologies, changing demographics, and evolving social issues would test their reforms. But the foundation they had built, trust between police and community, commitment to transparency, and dedication to ethical policing, would help them meet these challenges together.